Welcome to the Deep Chapter. What sparks a movement to reclaim a land after 1,800 years? In Chapter 3, we uncover Zionism's rise, from early Jewish pioneers to the British promise that reshaped Palestine. In 1800, a weakening Ottoman Empire sets the stage for dreams, conflicts, and tensions. Join me as we explore why this land pulls at so many hearts. Stick around, subscribe, and dive deep into history.
Ottoman Palestine's decline, 1800 to 1881. Close your eyes and picture. Palestine in 1800, dusty villages cling to the rugged hills of Jerusalem, Safed, and Hebron. Olive groves sway under a relentless sun, worked by Arab farmers who've tilled this land for generations. Above them looms the Ottoman Empire, a once mighty giant now stumbling under its own weight. In the shadows of this decline, a quiet hope flickers. Jews scattered across the world for centuries begin trickling back to their ancient homeland, driven by prayers whispered through exile. This is where the modern Israel-Palestine story takes root, a land of faith, dreams, and brewing tensions. Setting the scene, Palestine under Ottoman rule. It's the dawn of the 19th century. And Palestine is a forgotten corner of the Ottoman Empire, a vast realm stretching from Istanbul's grand palaces to the deserts of Arabia. Administered as the Songjak of Jerusalem, Palestine is a mosaic of ancient cities. Jerusalem, with its sacred stones, Safed, a haven for Jewish mystics, Hebron, steeped in biblical lore, and Gaza, a coastal trade hub. Historian Justin McCarthy estimates Palestine's population at approximately 300,000 in 1800, with 90% Arabs, mostly Muslim farmers, alongside Christian merchants and Bedouin tribes. Jews, numbering around 7,000, live in tight-knit communities, primarily in Jerusalem's Jewish quarter, and Safed. Sustained by Halukah, charitable funds from the Jewish diaspora in Europe and North Africa. Life here is harsh, the land is arid, irrigation is scarce, and trade routes bypass Palestine for bustling ports like Beirut. Ottoman rule feels distant. Local governors like Suleiman Pasha and Acre collect taxes but wield limited power, their authority eroded by corruption and neglect. The empire, once a titan that conquered Constantinople in 1453, is fraying. European powers, Britain, France, Russia circle like vultures, eyeing Ottoman territories. This decline isn't just political. It's a slow unraveling of a system that once held Palestine's diverse peoples together. For Jews, this land is Zion, the promised land of their prayers. A dream unbroken since the Roman exile we explored in Chapter 2. For Arabs, it's home, worked by their hands for centuries. As the Ottoman grip weakens, a question looms. What happens when new dreamers arrive in a land already claimed? Why the decline? The Ottoman Empire's struggles. Why was the Ottoman Empire crumbling? By 1800, it faced a cascade of crises. Economically, the empire was bleeding. Trade routes that once enriched Istanbul shifted to Europe's Atlantic ports, leaving provinces like Palestine starved of commerce. Markets in Jerusalem and Nablus stagnated, with local trade limited to olive oil and soap, per Ottoman tax records. Militarily, the empire was outmatched. Its defeats in the Russo-Turkish War 1768-1774 and the Treaty of Kuka-Kanarka 1774 stripped away territories, exposing Ottoman weakness. Internally, the system was rotting. The iltizam tax farming system allowed local elites to exploit peasants, squeezing Arab farmers in Palestine for taxes while sending profits to Istanbul. Corruption festered. Governors like Jetsar Pasha, who ruled Acre until 1804, were notorious for brutality, sparking rebellions. European powers piled on pressure. Napoleon's 1798 invasion of Egypt, though repelled, shook the region, proving the Ottomans couldn't defend their lands alone. The 1831 Egyptian rebellion under Muhammad Ali, who briefly seized Palestine, further humiliated Istanbul. These cracks mattered for Palestine. A weaker empire meant less control over borders and land. The 1858 Ottoman Land Code, part of the Tanzimat reforms, aimed to modernize ownership, but often enriched absentee landlords while displacing Arab tenant farmers. For Jews, this was a chance. Religious pilgrims, especially Sephardic Jews who'd faced Spain's 1492 expulsion, saw Palestine as a refuge. By 1820, their numbers crept to 8,000, per McCarthy's counts, small but significant. These weren't yet Zionists with political aims, just believers chasing a biblical promise. But their arrival stirred unease among Arab locals who saw strangers buying land. Why did this shift happen? A fading empire couldn't hold the status quo, opening a door for change and conflict. How it unfolded. Early Jewish immigration and tensions. So, how did this moment unfold? Between 1800 and 1881, Palestine saw a slow but steady trickle of Jewish immigrants, driven by faith and persecution. Most were Ashkenazi Jews from Eastern Europe, fleeing sporadic pogroms, or Sephardic Jews from North Africa, seeking spiritual renewal. They settled in Holy City's Jerusalem's Jewish quarter, where synagogues buzzed with prayer, Safed, a center for Kabbalistic mystics, and Hebron, tied to Abraham's tomb. By 1881, the Jewish population reached approximately 13,000, still under 5% of Palestine's total per McCarthy's estimates. These settlers relied on Halukah funds, donations from Jewish communities in Amsterdam, Istanbul, and Morocco, to survive. They weren't farmers, but scholars, living modestly, studying Torah. Yet their presence began to change the land. The Ottoman Land Code of 1858 allowed foreigners to buy land, and some Jews purchased small plots from absentee landlords in Istanbul or Beirut. These sales, legal under Ottoman law, often displaced Arab tenant farmers who'd worked the land for generations but held no deeds. Picture a farmer near Nablus suddenly answering to a Jewish landowner from Poland. Tensions brewed not outright conflict, but murmurs of unease. Ottoman governors, like those in Damascus, issued decrees limiting Jewish immigration, fearing unrest, but corruption and weak enforcement let settlers slip through. Arab society, organized by powerful clans like the Husseinis in Jerusalem, stayed agrarian. With approximately 250,000 Muslims and 20,000 Christians, per Ottoman records. European consulates, especially Britain's in Jerusalem, began offering protection to Jewish and Christian minorities, undermining Ottoman authority. By 1881, Palestine's demographic balance was shifting slightly, but enough to raise questions. Jews saw a return to Zion. Arabs saw strangers reshaping their home. This wasn't yet the clash of nations we'll see in later chapters, but the seeds of the Israel-Palestine conflict were quietly taking root. Context and perspectives. Let's zoom out for context. Western historians like Bernard Lewis frame Ottoman decline as a window for Jewish return, driven by religious devotion rather than politics. A Jew in Saft in 1800 was praying, not plotting statehood. Ottoman chroniclers, like those in 19th century Istanbul, barely noticed Palestine, driving it in defter tax registers. As a minor province, with a few Jews paying jizya, a tax for non-Muslims. Eastern perspectives, like those of Arab elites in Jerusalem, saw Jewish settlers as a curiosity, not yet a threat. But modern scholars differ sharply. Israeli historian Benny Morris views early immigration as a natural response to centuries of exile, a reclaiming of biblical heritage. Palestinian historian Elon argues it disrupted Arab life, as land sales to Jews displaced tenants, sowing early discord. Picture a Jewish pilgrim stepping onto Palestine's rocky soil, heart pounding with the weight of centuries-old prayers for Zion. Now imagine an Arab farmer, gazing across fields your family has worked for generations, only to see a stranger claim them with a piece of paper. Two dreams, one land, how do they coexist? In 1800, these were just whispers of tension, but they marked the dawn of a new chapter in the Israel-Palestine story. The Ottoman Empire's decline opened a door, but who would walk through it? As we move to the next segment, a spark called Zionism ignites, fueled by persecution and hope. What happens when a people's dream of return meets another's claim to home? Stay tuned to find out as we explore the birth of a movement that will change Palestine forever. The birth of Zionism, 1881 to 1896, 1881 in a Russian shtetl. Flames lick the sky as mobs torch Jewish homes, synagogues, and livelihoods. Screams echo through the narrow streets. Pogroms, violent anti-Jewish riots are tearing through the Russian Empire. Families flee, clutching what little they can carry, their dreams of safety shattered. Across the Mediterranean, a dusty, sun-scorched land called Palestine whispers promises of refuge, a biblical homeland etched in centuries of Jewish prayers. As the Ottoman Empire crumbles, as we saw last time, a new movement stirs. Zionism, the bold call for a Jewish homeland. This is the spark that lights the modern Israel-Palestine story. Born in desperation and hope, setting two peoples on a collision course.
8. Setting the scene.
A world of persecution and possibility. It's 1881, and the Jewish world is at a breaking point. In the Russian Empire, home to over 5 million Jews, half the world's Jewish population life is a fragile balance. Most are confined to the Pale of Settlement, a western strip from Poland to Ukraine, where they face crushing restrictions, barred from owning land, limited to trades like tailoring or money lending. And vilified as outsiders, Jews live under constant threat. In Palestine, still a backwater of the Ottoman Empire, life moves slowly. About 400,000 people, per historian Justin McCarthy, inhabit its rugged hills and coastal plains. 90% are Arab Muslims and Christians, farming olive groves or trading in markets like Jerusalem's Old City. The Jewish population, around 13,000, clusters in holy cities. Jerusalem's Jewish quarter, buzzing with prayer. Safed, a mystic haven for Kabbalists, and Hebron, tied to Abraham's tomb. These Jews, sustained by Halukah donations from the diaspora, are religious pilgrims, not yet nation builders. But the Ottoman Empire, as we explored last time, is faltering. Economic stagnation, military losses, and European pressure, like Napoleon's 1798 invasion of Egypt, have weakened its grip. The 1858 Land Code, part of the Tanzimat reforms, allows land purchases often by foreigners, creating opportunities. In Europe, nationalism surges. Italians unified in 1861. Germans in 1871. This fever for self-determination reaches Jewish thinkers, who see Palestine not just as a spiritual home, but a potential refuge. The stage is set by a single event. On March 13, 1881, Tsar Alexander II is assassinated, and Russian authorities scapegoat Jews, unleashing a wave of pogroms that will change history. Who will harness this moment, and what will it mean for Palestine's Arab majority? Why the birth of Zionism? Roots of a movement. Why did Zionism emerge in this moment? The answer lies in a brutal collision of persecution, ideology, and opportunity. The 1881 to 1884 pogroms in Russia were a cataclysm. Tsar Alexander II's assassination, mobs often egged on by local officials, attacked Jewish communities across the Pale. In Kishinev, Odessa, and Warsaw, homes were burned, shops looted, and dozens killed. Some estimates cite over 40 deaths in 1881 alone, per Russian archives. Thousands fled, their faith in European tolerance shattered. Anti-Semitism wasn't new. Jews had faced expulsions from England 1290, Spain 1492, and countless medieval purges. But the 19th century scale was relentless. In Western Europe, even emancipated Jews faced social exclusion. Think of France's Dreyfus affair. Brewing by the 1890s, the Enlightenment's promise of equality had failed. Meanwhile, nationalism swept Europe, inspiring dreams of self-rule. For Jews, this took a desperate edge. Leon Pinsker, a Russian Jewish doctor, captured this in his 1882 pamphlet, Auto-Emancipation. Jews are a nation without a home, he wrote, arguing assimilation was impossible amid hatred. Palestine, the biblical Zion, became the answer, not just a spiritual refuge, but a practical necessity. Ottoman decline, as we saw, made this feasible. The empire's economy was crumbling. Trade routes bypassed Palestine, leaving it poor, per Ottoman tax records. Military losses, like the 1774 Treaty of Kukak-Kanarka, drained resources. The Tanzimat reforms 1839 to 1876, especially the 1858 Land Code, allowed land sales, often to foreigners, as corrupt officials looked the other way. Early Jewish groups like Hovevei Zion, Lovers of Zion, formed in the 1870s in Romania and Russia, began pooling funds to settle Jews in Palestine. Religious longing, rooted in prayers like "Next Year in Jerusalem," met secular urgency. For Arabs in Palestine, who'd lived there for centuries, these shifts were troubling. Their agrarian society, led by clans like the Husseinis, faced disruption from land sales. Zionism wasn't yet a mass movement, but its ideological birth marked a turning point. How it unfell. The first Aliyah and its impact. How did this spark become a flame? The first Aliyah from 1881 to 1903 brought approximately 25,000 Jews to Palestine, mostly from Russia and Romania, with approximately 15,000 settling by 1896 per Jewish Agency records. These weren't the religious pilgrims of 1800, but young, often secular idealists fleeing pogroms and poverty. They founded agricultural colonies Riosh and Lezion, 1882, Zikrin Yaakov, 1883, Petah Tikva, re-established 1883, with support from Hovevei Zion and philanthropists like Baron Edmund de Rothschild, who funded vineyards and schools. These settlers bought land legally, often from absentee Ottoman landlords in Istanbul or Beirut, under the 1858 Land Code. But here's the rub. These lands were worked by Arab tenant farmers, who held no legal title. Sale and Rishon LeZion might evict a family farming there for generations, sparking resentment. Imagine an Arab peasant near Jaffa watching Jewish settlers plant vineyards on fields your ancestors tilled. By 1896, the Jewish population hit approximately 28,000, still under 7% of Palestine's total, but their impact was growing. Colonies introduced Hebrew schools and European farming techniques, laying seeds for a Jewish economy. Ottoman governors, like those in Damascus, issued bans on Jewish immigration, citing fears of unrest. But corruption and weak enforcement let settlers arrive. Arab elites like the Nashashibi clan in Jerusalem raised concerns in local councils, though not yet as a unified nationalist movement. European consulates, especially Britain's in Jerusalem, offered protection to Jewish settlers, further undermining Ottoman control. Early clashes emerged, not war, but disputes over land boundaries and water rights. In 1886, a skirmish near Petah Tikva saw Arab farmers protest Jewish expansion, per Ottoman reports. Zionists like Pinsker spoke of self-reliance, not yet statehood, but their vision was clear: a Jewish future in Palestine. For Arabs, this was a new reality, strangers reshaping their homeland. The first Aliyah wasn't a conquest, but it planted the seeds of a profound shift. Context and perspectives. Let's zoom out for context. Western historians like Walter Lacour frame the first Aliyah as a desperate response to persecution, not a colonial project. A Russian Jew in 1881, fleeing a burning shtetl, sought safety, not dominance. Russian archives document pogroms killing dozens and displacing thousands, pushing Jews toward Palestine. Eastern scholars like Arab chroniclers in Damascus saw Jewish arrivals as a minor issue amid Ottoman decline, noting them in Defter as paying jizya, a tax for non-Muslims. But modern interpretations split sharply. Israeli historian Benny Morris views the Aliyah as a revival of Jewish presence, a step toward nationhood rooted in biblical ties. Palestinian historian Rashid Khalidi argues it disrupted Arab life, as land sales displaced tenants, citing early complaints later echoed in newspapers like Philistine, founded 1911. Its documents tell the story. Pinsker's Auto-Emancipation, 1882, urged Jews to build a homeland, while Ottoman land records show purchases spiking from 1881, with approximately 1,000 acres bought by 1890, per historian Gershon Shafir. Cause and effect. The first Aliyah established Jewish settlements, creating a foothold, but sparking Arab resentment over land loss. The broader picture. Palestine was a multi-faith land: Muslims, Christians, Jews under a weakening empire. Europe's nationalist surge inspired Jewish hopes, but Arabs tied to the land saw change coming. Neither side fully grasped the collision ahead, but fault lines were forming, etched in every plot of land sold. Picture a Jewish settler standing on a hill near Rishon LeZion, gazing at fields you've bought with your life's savings, dreaming of a safe home after centuries of exile. Now imagine an Arab farmer watching from a nearby village, your family's fields now in strangers' hands, your future uncertain. To dreams, one of return, one of roots meet in a land too small to hold both without tension. In 1881, these were sparks, not flames, but they lit Zionism's path. The Ottoman Empire's decline opened the door, but who would shape this vision? Theodor Herzl in Political Zionism, 1896 to 1904. In 1896, watching Europe's promise of equality crumble, Theodor Herzl, a Jewish journalist, sees his people trapped, hated in Russia, shunned in France, scattered across a hostile world. In Palestine, a land under Ottoman rule, Jewish settlers from the first Aliyah, as we saw last time, are building farms, but their efforts are small, unfocused. Herzl dreams bigger, a Jewish state, a homeland to end centuries of exile. His vision will ignite a movement, but at a cost. This is the story of political Zionism's birth, a spark that will light hope for Jews and tension for the Arabs of Palestine, setting the scene. A world of anti-Semitism and ambition. It's 1896. Europe is a powder keg of nationalism and prejudice. In the Russian Empire, pogroms continue to drive Jews from the Pale of Settlement, with approximately 15,000 having fled to Palestine by now, per Jewish Agency records. In Palestine, a dusty Ottoman province, approximately 450,000 people live 90% Arab Muslims and Christians. Farming olive groves or trading in Jerusalem's bustling markets, per historian Justin McCarthy. The Jewish population, now approximately 28,000, grows in colonies like Rishon LeZion, as we explored last segment. But the Ottoman Empire, weakened by debt and European pressure, barely controls its lands. The 1858 Land Code allows land purchases, often by Jewish settlers, stirring unease among Arab farmers. In Western Europe, Jews face a subtler hatred. The Dreyfus Affair, 1894 to 1906, where a Jewish French officer is falsely accused of treason, exposes deep anti-Semitism, even in enlightened France. Nationalism sweeps. The Continentally and Germany have unified, and Poles dream of independence. For Jews, this sparks a question. Why not us? Theodor Herzl, a 36-year-old journalist in Vienna, feels this acutely. Raised in an assimilated Jewish family, he once believed in integration, but Europe's hatred shatters that illusion. In Palestine, the first Aliyah's colonies, struggle. Rishon LeZion's vineyards thrive, but settlers face Arab protests over land. The Ottoman governor in Jerusalem, wary of unrest, tightens immigration rules, but enforcement is lax. Herzl sees a chance, a unified Jewish movement to claim a homeland. What will this mean for Palestine's Arabs, who've called this land home for centuries? Why political Zionism? Roots of Herzl's vision. Why did Zionism turn political now? The answer lies in a perfect storm of persecution, ideology, and opportunity. Anti-Semitism was suffocating. In Russia, pogroms from 1881 to 1884, as we saw, killed dozens and displaced thousands, with aftershocks continuing. Over 100 pogroms hit Jewish communities by 1896, per Russian records. In Western Europe, the Dreyfus Affair, 1894, revealed that even assimilated Jews weren't safe. Herzl, covering the trial as a journalist, was shaken. If France, the cradle of liberty, betrayed its Jews, where was hope? Europe's nationalist surge offered a model. Italians had their Risorgimento. Germans rallied under Bismarck. Jews, Herzl argued, needed their own nation to survive. His 1896 book, The Jewish State, laid it out. "We are a people, one people," he wrote, proposing a homeland, ideally in Palestine, the biblical Zion. Ottoman decline made this plausible. The empire, crippled by debts to European banks, £200 million by 1890, per historian Donald Quaterd, couldn't police its borders. The 1856 Tanzimat reforms promised equality, easing Jewish entry, though bans persisted on paper. Zionist groups like Hovevei Zion, active since the 1870s, had paved the way, funding colonies like Zichron Yaakov. Herzl took it further, envisioning a global movement backed by diplomacy. He wasn't Alawite thinkers like Moses Hess, Rome, and Jerusalem. 1862 had floated similar ideas, but Herzl's charisma and timing gave them life. For Palestine's Arabs, approximately 400,000 strong, this was a distant rumble. Their society, led by clans like the Husseinis, was agrarian, focused on local issues, not yet nationalism. But land sales to Jews, often by absentee Ottoman landlords, were starting to sting. Herzl's vision wasn't just a dream, it was a challenge to an existing world. How it unfolded. The Zionist Congress and beyond, how did Herzl's vision take shape? In 1896, he published The Jewish State, a manifesto calling for a Jewish homeland, preferably in Palestine. It electrified Jewish communities from Vienna's to Warsaw's shtetls. In August 1897, Herzl convened the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, drawing 200 delegates, rabbis, intellectuals, and settlers. They adopted the Basel Program. Zionism seeks to establish a home for the Jewish people in Palestine, secured under public law. This was a leap from the first Aliyah scattered colonies. Herzl sought international backing, meeting Ottoman officials in Istanbul and European diplomats. He pitched Palestine as a solution to the Jewish question, offering to settle Ottoman debts. Sultan Abdul Hamid II, wary of unrest, rejected statehood but allowed limited immigration. By 1904, approximately 35,000 Jews lived in Palestine, per Jewish Agency records, up from 28,000 in 1896. New colonies, like Rehovo 1890, grew funded by Rothschild and the Jewish Colonization Association. Land purchases, legal under Ottoman law, displaced Arab tenant farmers, sparking protests. In 1891, Jerusalem's Arab notables petitioned the Sultan against Jewish immigration, per Ottoman archives citing land loss. Skirmishes like one near Petah Tikva in 1898 saw Arab farmers clash with Jewish settlers over boundaries. Herzl's diplomacy faltered. He explored Uganda as a temporary homeland in 1903, outraging Zionists, but his vision endured. European consulates, especially Britain's, protected Jewish settlers, undermining Ottoman control. For Arabs, led by families like the Nashashibas, these changes were alarming, though not yet a nationalist crisis. By Herzl's death in 1904, Zionism was a global movement, setting the stage for conflict. Context and perspectives. Let's step back for context. Western historians like Derek Penzler see Herzl's Zionism as a pragmatic response to anti-Semitism. The Dreyfus Affair and Russian pogroms, over 200 by 1900, per Russian records, proved Jews had no future in Europe. Herzl's vision was diplomatic, not colonial, seeking legal recognition. Ottoman chroniclers, like those in Istanbul, saw Jewish immigration as a minor issue, noting in Defter that Jews paid jizya. But modern scholars diverge. Israeli historian Anita Shapira frames Herzl as a visionary, uniting Jews for survival. Palestinian historian Walid Khaledi argues he ignored Arabs, citing the Jewish state's silence on Palestine's inhabitants. Documents tell the story. The Basel Program 1897 set clear goals, while Ottoman petitions from 1891 show early Arab unease. Cause and effect. Herzl's movement gave Zionism global legitimacy, but land disputes fueled Arab resentment, per early reports in Al-Carmel founded later, 1908. The broader picture. Palestine was a multi-faith land under a crumbling empire, caught in nationalism's rise. Jews saw a refuge. Arabs saw their home changing. Neither side foresaw the full collision, but Herzl's work drew the battle lines. Picture Theodor Herzl, penning his dream of a Jewish state, his heart heavy with Europe's hatred. Now imagine an Arab farmer in Rehovo watching Jewish settlers fence off fields your family worked for centuries. To visions one of refuge, one of roots clash in a land too small to hold both unchallenged. In 1896, this was a spark, not a fire, but it lit Zionism's global flame. Herzl's death in 1904 didn't dim his vision, it grew stronger. As we move to the next segment, new waves of settlers and Arab nationalism rise, fueled by the same land's pull. Second, Aliyah and Arab nationalism, 1904 to 1914. Picture a golden dawn over Palestine's hills in 1904. Young Jewish settlers, fleeing Russia's blood-soaked pogroms, shovel earth for a kibbutz, their hearts alight with dreams of a homeland. A few miles away, an Arab farmer gazes at fields his family has tilled for centuries, now sold to strangers. In Jerusalem's coffee houses, Arab intellectuals whisper of independence, inspired by revolutions abroad. The Ottoman Empire, crumbling as we saw with Herzl's vision, can't hold back the tide. This is the story of the second Aliyah, and Arab nationalism's rise to movements. Born of hope and defiance, colliding in a land too small to contain both unchallenged, setting the scene, Palestine on the brink, it's 1904, and Palestine stands at a crossroads, a province of the faltering Ottoman Empire. It's home to approximately 500,000 people. Per historian Justin McCarthy, 90% Arab Muslims and Christians, who farm olive groves, herd goats, or trade in vibrant markets like Jerusalem's Old City and Jaffa's port. The Jewish population grown to approximately 35,000 by the first Aliyah in Herzl's Zionist push. As we explored last time, clusters and colonies like Rishon LeZion and Petah Tikva, planting vineyards and reviving Hebrew. The Ottoman Empire is a hollow giant, bled dry by 200 million pounds in debt to European banks, per historian Donald Quatert, and weakened by defeats like the 1878 Russo-Turkish War, which ceded Balkan territories. The 1858 Land Code, part of the Tanzimat reforms, allows land sales often to Jewish settlers, displacing Arab tenant farmers who lack legal titles. In Europe, anti-Semitism surges. Russia's 1903 Kishinev pogrom killed 49 Jews and injured 500, per Russian archives, driving thousands to Palestine. Meanwhile, nationalist fervor sweeps the Middle East. In Damascus and Beirut, Arab intellectuals, educated in European-style schools, read of Italy's 1861 unification and Egypt's 1882 revolt, dreaming of independence from Ottoman rule. In Palestine, powerful clans like the Husseinis and Nashashibis dominate local politics. But a new generation whispers of Arab self. The Young Turk Revolution of 1908, led by reformers like Enver Pasha, promises change but tightens Turkish control, frustrating Arab aspirations. Palestine's multi-faith fabric, Muslims, Christians, Jews, fraying as two visions, Zionist and Arab nationalists take root. The stage is set for a clash not yet fully realized, but growing with every new settler and every call for freedom. Why the second Aliyah and Arab nationalism, roots of dual aspirations? Why did these movements surge now? For Jews, the answer is survival. The second Aliyah, from 1904 to 1914, was sparked by relentless anti-Semitism. How it unfolded, kibbutzim, Arab resistance, and growing tensions, how did this moment play out? The second Aliyah brought approximately 40,000 Jews to Palestine by 1914, doubling the Jewish population to approximately 60,000 per Jewish Agency estimates. These settlers, unlike their predecessors, were driven by socialist ideals, founding kibbutzim communal farms like Degania, 1910. Context and perspectives. Let's step back for context. Western historians like Anita Shapira view the second Aliyah as a cultural revolution. Kibbutzim like Degania weren't just farms, but experiments in a socialist, Hebrew-speaking society, per Shapira's Israel, a history. Russian records note approximately 2 million Jews fled pogroms by 1914, with Palestine a key refuge. Ottoman chroniclers like those in Damascus saw Jewish settlers as a minor issue, recording them in Defter as paying jizya. But modern scholars diverge. Israeli historian Benny Morris frames the Aliyah as nation-building, a step toward statehood rooted in survival. The Palestinian historian Rashid Khalidi argues it marginalized Arabs. Al-Kramel's 1908 warnings of land loss as early resistance documents paint a vivid picture. The Zionist organization's 1907 report outlined settlement goals, aiming for 100,000 Jews by 1920, while Falastin's 1911 editorials decried displacement of approximately 10,000 tenants by 1914, per Khalidi. Arab petitions like the 1910 letter to Istanbul show growing unease, though not yet organized nationalism. The broader context. Palestine, a multi-faith land of Muslims, Christians, and Jews, was caught in the global nationalist surge. The Young Turks' 1908 revolution sparked Arab hopes, but their Turkification policies, mandating Turkish in schools, pushed figures like Sakakini toward autonomy. Neither Jews nor Arabs fully saw the coming clash, but the fault lines were deepening, etched in every kibbutz built and every protest raised. Cause and effect. What caused this moment, and what were its ripple effects? The second Aliyah was driven by Russian pogroms. Kishinev, 1903. 49 dead. In Odessa, 1905, 300 dead, pushing approximately 40,000 Jews to Palestine, per Jewish Agency records. Herzl's Zionist vision, formalized in 1897, inspired these settlers who embraced socialist ideals from Europe's labor movements. Leaders like Ben-Gurion saw kibbutzim as the backbone of a Jewish society. Ottoman weakness, with 200 million pounds in debt, and losses like Libya in 1911, enabled this migration. The 1858 Land Code facilitated approximately 100,000 acres of purchases by 1914. Per Shafir, funded by Rothschild and the Jewish Colonization Association, this strengthened Jewish presence by 1914. Jews were 12% of Palestine's population, but displaced approximately 10,000 Arab tenants. Per Cleody, sparking economic and cultural insecurity. For example, a 1911 Palestine article described a Jaffa farmer losing his livelihood to a Jewish buyer, fueling resentment. The settlers' Hebrew revival, with schools and newspapers like Hapoel Hatzar, created a proto-Jewish state, alienating Arabs who saw it as exclusionary. Self-defense groups like Bar Giora, formed in 1907, signaled permanence, escalating tensions with skirmishes, like Sajira's 1908 protest. Arab nationalism, meanwhile, grew from Ottoman failures and global currents. The Tanzimat reforms raised taxes, squeezing peasants, while the Young Turks' 1908 revolution promised autonomy, but imposed Turkification, mandating Turkish in schools and conscription. This alienated Arab elites, per historian Eugene Rogan. European ideas spread through Beirut schools, inspired figures like Najib Azuri, whose 1905 book called for Arab independence. Egypt's 1911 Nationalist Congress and Syria's 1913 Arab Congress fueled Palestine's intellectuals. Like Sakakin, who taught Arabic to preserve identity, newspapers like Al-Karmel and Falastin voiced fears of Zionist encroachment, with a 1910 petition to Istanbul demanding immigration curbs, per Ottoman archives. These dual movements, Zionist settlement and Arab nationalism, created a feedback loop. Long-term, these dynamics reshaped Palestine. Kibbutzim laid cultural and economic roots for a Jewish state, with Hebrew as a national language, per Ben Yehuda's dictionaries. But displacement sowed Arab distrust, with approximately 10% of Palestine's farmland Jewish shown by 1914, per Shafir. This economic shift disrupted Arab agrarian life, pushing tenant farmers to cities like Jaffa, where unrest grew. Arab nationalism, though nascent, gained traction, with figures like the Husseinis later leading resistance. The cultural separation, Jews building Hebrew institutions, Arabs reviving Arabic entrenched division, per Khalidi. By 1914, these tensions primed Palestine for World War I's upheaval, when British promises, like the Balfour Declaration, would escalate the conflict. The ripples of 1904 to 1914 land disputes, cultural revival, mutual suspicions, set the stage for a century of struggle as two peoples claimed the same land with irreconcilable dreams. Picture a Jewish settler in Degania, breaking ground under a starlit sky, dreaming of a homeland free from pogrom's terror. Now, imagine an Arab farmer in Jaffa, watching your ancestral fields fenced off by strangers, your roots shaken by change. To dreams one of revival, one of resilience collide in a land too small to hold both without strife. In 1904, these were sparks, not flames, but they lit a fuse that still burns. The Second Aliyah and Arab nationalism reshaped Palestine, weaving hope and fear into its soil. As we move to the next segment, World War I and a British promise, the Balfour Declaration, will tip the scales, turning tensions into a global struggle. What happens when empires choose sides in a land's fate? Stay tuned to find out, as the Israel-Palestine story races toward a pivotal moment. World War I and the Balfour Declaration, 1914 to 1917. Picture the world in 1914, torn apart by war. Trenches scar Europe's fields, empires clash, and the Ottoman Empire, already crumbling, faces its final reckoning. In Palestine, Jewish settlers of the Second Aliyah, as we saw last time, build kibbutzim, while Arab nationalists dream of independence. Amid the chaos, a British diplomat pens a 67-word letter, the Balfour Declaration, promising a Jewish homeland. It's a spark that lights hope for one people and betrayal for another. This is the story of World War I and the Balfour Declaration, a moment when global powers redrew Palestine's fate, setting the Israel-Palestine conflict on a path of no return. Setting the scene. A world and region at war. It's July 1914, and the world plunges into chaos. World War I erupts after Archduke Franz Ferdinand's assassination, pitting the Allies Britain, France, Russia against the Central Powers Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire. Europe's fields become battlegrounds. Over 16 million will die by 1918, per historian John Keegan. The Ottoman Empire, weakened by £200 million in debt and losses like the 1911 Italian invasion of Libya, joins Germany, desperate to survive. Palestine, a small Ottoman province, is home to approximately 600,000 people. Per historian Justin McCarthy, 5% Arab Muslims and Christians, farming olives or trading in Jaffa's port. The Jewish population, swelled to approximately 60,000 by the second Aliyah, lives in kibbutzim like Degania, in colonies like Rishon LeZion, reviving Hebrew and building a proto-economy. The war disrupts everything. Ottoman conscription pulls Arab and Jewish men into the Turkish army, while famine and locust plagues 1915 ravaged Palestine's crops, killing thousands per Ottoman records. In the Arab world, nationalism simmers. The Young Turks' 1908 revolution, as we saw, promised reform but imposed Turkification, alienating Arabs. In Mecca, Sharif Hussein of the Hashemites dreams of an Arab state, egged on by British whispers. In Palestine, Arab intellectuals like Khalil Sakakine push cultural revival, while newspapers like Falastin 1911 warn of Zionist land buys approximately 100,000 acres by 1914, per Gershon Shafir. Jewish settlers, led by figures like David Ben-Gurion, strengthen their foothold, with self-defense groups like Hashemer guarding kibbutzim. Britain, eyeing the Middle East's oil and the Suez Canal, sees Palestine as a strategic prize. By 1916, secret deals and promises swirl, reshaping a land caught in a global storm. Two peoples, Jews seeking a homeland, Arabs seeking independence, stand on the brink, unaware of the seismic shift coming. Why World War I and the Balfour Declaration? Roots of a pivotal moment. Why did this moment change Palestine's fate? World War I was a crucible. The Ottoman Empire, battered by decades of decline, think Russo-Turkish War, 1878. Balkan Wars 191-21913, faced collapse. Its £200 million debt to European banks, per Donald Quatier, left it vulnerable. Joining Germany in 1914 was a gamble to reclaim power, but defeats like Gallipoli, 1915, exposed its weakness. Palestine, a frontline province, became a chessboard for Allied strategy. Britain needed to secure the Suez Canal and Middle Eastern oil, vital for its navy, per historian David Fromkin. Supporting Zionism and Arab nationalism offered leverage. For Jews, the war amplified urgency. The second, Aliyah's approximately 40,000 settlers, driven by pogroms like Kishinev, 1903, 49 dead, had built kibbutzim. But Herzl's death in 1904 left Zionism leaderless. Chaim Weizmann, a Russian-born chemist in Britain, stepped up lobbying for a Jewish homeland. Ilodo, his scientific work on acetone for explosives gave him access to British elites, per Weizmann's memoirs. Zionists saw Britain's war needs as a chance to secure Palestine, the biblical Zion, as a refuge. For Arabs, the war fueled nationalist hopes. Sharif Hussein, Mecca's ruler, sought an Arab state, inspired by Egypt's 1911 Congress and Syria's 1913 Arab Congress. Britain's 1915 McMahon-Hussein correspondence vaguely promised Arab independence, per British archives, excluding Palestine ambiguously. Arab intellectuals in Damascus and Jerusalem, like Sakakine, pushed for self-rule, while Al-Karmel, 1908, decried Zionist land buys. But Britain and France had other plans. The 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement secretly carved up the Middle East, assigning Palestine to international control, per declassified documents. The Balfour Declaration, issued November 2, 1917, was Britain's bid to win Jewish support, especially in America and Russia, while securing Palestine strategically. For Jews, it was a triumph. For Arabs, a betrayal. Both saw Palestine as their future, but global powers held the pen. How it unfolded, war, diplomacy, and the Balfour Declaration. How did this moment unfold? World War I hit Palestine hard. Ottoman conscription drained manpower. Approximately 10,000 Arabs and Jews were drafted, per Ottoman records. The 1915 locust plague and war blockades caused famine, killing approximately 5,000 in Palestine. Per historian Eugene Rogan, British forces, led by General Allenby, advanced from Egypt, capturing Jerusalem by December 1917. Jewish settlers like those in Dagania faced hardship but continued building, with Hashem regarding kibbutzim. Zionist leaders like Weizmann worked tirelessly in London. In 1916, the Sykes-Picot Agreement divided Ottoman lands, but Britain sought a stronger hold on Palestine. Weizmann, leveraging his wartime contributions, lobbied Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour. On November 2, 1917, Balfour issued a 67-word letter to Lord Rothschild, a Zionist leader, declaring His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, per British archives. It promised to protect non-Jewish communities, but Arab Zadi, 5% of the population, felt sidelined. The declaration was strategic. Britain aimed to rally Jewish support in America, where Zionists influenced Wilson's administration, and in Russia, where revolution threatened Allied unity. Meanwhile, Sharif Hussein launched the Arab Revolt 1916, backed by Britain's T.E. Lawrence, expecting independence. The McMahon-Hussein Correspondence 1915 promised an Arab state, but Palestine's status was vague, per historian Jonathan Schneer. Arab leaders like the Husseinis protested Balfour in 1917 petitions to Istanbul, per Ottoman archives, fearing Zionist dominance. By 1917, Jews owned approximately 120,000 acres, per Shafir, and numbered approximately 66,000, while Arab unrest grew. Skirmishes near Jaffa in 1916, per Falastin reports, signaled tension. The declaration, published in global newspapers, gave Zionism international legitimacy. But Arabs saw betrayal as Britain's promises clashed. Palestine was now a global issue, its fate tied to war's outcome. Context and perspectives. Let's zoom out. Western historians, like Schneer, see Balfour as pragmatic diplomacy. Britain needed Jewish support and Palestine's strategic value. The war's toll 8 million dead by 1917, per Keegan pushed desperate measures. Zionist records, like Weizmann's letters, show relentless lobbying, framing Palestine as a refuge for approximately 2 million Jews fleeing pogroms, per Russian archives. Ottoman officials, in defter records, noted Jewish growth but focused on war losses, like Gallipoli's 87,000 dead. Modern scholars diverge. Israeli historian Benny Morris views Balfour as a Zionist milestone, legitimizing a Jewish homeland. Palestinian historian Walid Khalidi argues it ignored Arabs, citing Al-Karmil's 1917 editorials calling it a betrayal. Documents tell the story. The Balfour Declaration 1917 promised a Jewish home, while the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence 1915 fueled Arab hopes. The Sykes-Picot Agreement 1916, declassified in 1917, revealed Britain's double-dealing. Palestine, a multi-faith land, was caught in imperialism's web. Arabs, inspired by Syria's 1913 Congress, saw independence slipping away. Jews, with approximately 66,000 in Palestine, saw hope. Neither fully grasped the clash ahead, but Balfour drew a line in the sand. Cause and effect. What caused this moment, and what were its ripples? World War I's chaos drove the Balfour Declaration. The effects were profound. Balfour gave Zionism global legitimacy, per Morris, attracting more settlers, approximately 10,000 by 1920, per Jewish Agency records. It positioned Britain to control Palestine via the 1917 conquest, setting up the mandate. Jewish institutions, like Degania's schools, strengthened, with Hebrew as a national language, per Anita Shapira. But for Arabs, approximately 500,000 in Palestine, Balfour was a betrayal. Falastin's 1917 editorials called it colonial theft, and protests, like Jaffa's 1917 marches, signaled resistance, per per Khalidi. Land disputes intensified approximately 10,000 tenants displaced by 1917 per Shafir, fueling economic insecurity. Arab nationalism, sparked by the 1913 Arab Congress and Young Turks' failures, grew militant, with figures like the Husseinis organizing. The declaration's vague, non-Jewish communities clause ignored Arab majorities, sowing distrust. Long-term Balfour entrenched division, Jews saw a state emerging with approximately 2% of Palestine's land Jewish-owned, per Shafir. Arabs pushed to cities like Jaffa, faced cultural and economic erosion, per Khalidi. The war's end brought British rule, with Allenby's 1917 Jerusalem capture marking a shift. The declaration's ripple Zionist hope, Arab alienation, set the stage for the Mandate's conflicts, as we'll see in Chapter 4. By aligning with Zionists, Britain tilted Palestine's fate, making coexistence harder as two peoples claimed one land with irreconcilable dreams. Picture a Jewish settler in Jerusalem, clutching Balfour's letter, tears of hope for a homeland after centuries of exile. Now imagine an Arab merchant in Jaffa, reading the same words, feeling your homeland slip away under foreign promises. To dreams one of refuge, one of roots collide in a land scarred by war's chaos. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration was a spark that lit joy for one and betrayal for another. World War I reshaped Palestine, tying its fate to global powers.
Chapter 3 closes, leaving Palestine changed. From 1800 to 1917, Zionism rose amid Ottoman decline, Jewish pioneers fled pogroms, and Herzl's vision sparked a global movement. The first and second Aliyah clashed with Arab nationalists, and the Balfour Declaration promised a Jewish homeland, leaving Arabs betrayed. Join Chapter 4 as Britain governs this divided land. Subscribe, share, and explore history with the Deep Chapter.